Okay, hi guys. Here today with a video about winning. Um, I do have a script for these, in case people wonder, but it's not a proper script. It's a series of bullet points that I then ramble about in an incoherent manner, and I cannot bring myself to kind of record segments and edit them all together nicely. Um, Partly it doesn't feel like me, partly like I make no money doing this, which I don't think surprises anyone. So putting that amount of effort in doesn't feel worth it. And, you know, maybe if I put the effort in, I'd make some money, but I'm not going to. So, winning. Um, I was led onto this by a few random discussions over the last month with people, wherein they talk about why they like winning or losing and so on. And I started trying to extol the virtues of losing. And a couple of people seem to get it, and a couple of people seem very resistant to the idea, which kind of led me on to, you know, kind of explaining all this through. So, from a starting point, um, the the upside of losing is normally that losing is what teaches you to be better at something. It doesn't matter if you're playing a card game, a video game, chess, whatever. When you win, you don't learn very much. I'm not saying you can't learn anything, but you're probably learning maybe 1% of what losses can teach you if you have the introspective to evaluate them. So to give you an example, I'm playing you at a card game and I beat you. What do I learn? Well, I did what I always do and I won. So I have actually gained no knowledge at the end of the game that I didn't have at the start, apart from this method worked this time. If I play you and I lose, as long as I am competent enough to be able to evaluate the loss, I can look at it and go, okay, so I played this out wrong. I should have done this. In video game terms, maybe I shoot at you and I miss, and I go, maybe I should have been hiding in the rafters rather than hiding behind the box. Maybe I realise that I need more practice actually getting shots on target. There's always something you can evaluate, and it's not to say that sometimes you can't be at like your skill cap. I've played a lot of Slay the Spire. I'm at difficulty 16, I think it is, thereabouts. And I don't know what I'm doing right or wrong at that point. I've hit a wall in terms of I do not have the ability to see what I'm screwing up. So I just do like 50 runs and one of them works, and it seems exactly the same as the other runs to me, and I don't know the difference. And that can be very difficult. That is a danger of losing when you can't learn from it. And I've had a discussion with somebody very recently about the idea of they think that gaming should be all about the grind to get better, and I've cautioned them about the idea of what you're actually grinding is misery, because you're not learning from the mistakes you're making. You're just playing the scenario through 100 times, trying to work out what's wrong but not being able to spot it. That's not good for you. It would be a simple point, I would say. Like, you're farming misery. You're not grinding for success. I think the other thing about losing that's really important is embracing the game itself rather than necessarily the outcome. And it's very difficult. It's something I really struggle with. I have to go away for like a day or two sometimes to appreciate the games I played when I'm competing with people, because at the time I'm focusing on winning. And to quote Will Ferrell, if you're not first, you're last. There's very much a mindset behind, well, I may have won 4 games, but I lost the 5th one, and therefore I lost the tournament because I did not win the tournament. And it's a bad attitude. it's something I've definitely got internalized. It's something I'd kind of like to fight off, but I think it's very deeply part of my personality. And yeah, I do think it's unhealthy. You can sometimes recognize things and still be at the mercy of them, right? Like psychology is great. I think, say, understanding that playing can be fun, even when you're losing, is really important. And if losing is that unfun, you probably shouldn't be going near that game in question. And like for a good example of that, I'd point people at maybe Hollow Knight, Dark Souls, games that I love, but that I have told a lot of people I know to never touch because I know they'll hate them because they don't get joy from being kicked around for 4 hours. And again, it's a mindset, I think. I don't get much of a higher endorphin rush than breaking down that barrier. Losing to a boss for 3 or 4 hours and then beating it and going, I got good enough. And, Dark Souls has the unofficial catchphrase of get good. And what people very much forget about it is that while it's now said in a very snide manner by people, it was originally genuine advice. How do I beat this boss? You get good. You fight him, and you fight him, and you fight him, and you learn what he's doing, and you learn what you have to do, and you slowly get there, and you slowly make less mistakes, and then maybe eventually you just get a bit lucky, but you've done a lot of practice. You're not just going to luck your way through an entire boss fight. And it'll all come together and you'll win. And, if you've got the sort of personality, you'll feel amazing because you just won. And I think that's a really important part of consequences. Games need consequences. The losing makes the winning better. And I think that applies to video games. Again, I think it applies to card games. If you lose to a guy every week at your local tournament and then 1 week you beat him, you're going to feel amazing. You're going to be like, yeah, I've finally taken down the raid boss player. I've finally got that win on him. I have got good enough at this game that I'm now taking on, the well-practiced long-term players. And again, to give an example of sort of consequences and the problem of not having them, I suppose, it would be Yoshi's Woolly World. It's a Nintendo Wii game, I think it was on. But it has this feature where basically if you are losing at it, it starts putting on the padded gloves. So, you start with 3 lives, I think. Once you lose the 3 lives, it just goes, do you want to replay the level? So the lives weren't really meaningful. If you lose them again, it goes, do you just want infinite lives and we won't restart the level? If you keep jumping down holes, it straps wings to you. If you still keep jumping down holes, it fills the holes then. And I'm not saying that's inherently bad, because if you've got children, we'll use children as the simplest example, they're going to have a good time. And, I think it's important to balance that win-loss thing in that regard. You don't want to dump I'm bad at age ranges, but let's say an 8-year-old in front of a console and have them just lose over and over and over again because they'll just get frustrated. Having that difficulty setting is good. What I would probably criticise is the fact that it basically just turns them on whether you want them or not. They are very much pushed at you. It's similar, I guess, in scope to the idea of when you play Resident Evil on the harder modes, the second or third time you die triggers it going, do you want to play on easy mode? And I don't mind it asking because, what if you have chosen a mode and gone, I'm in over my head? I think giving players an option to back down a bit is fine. But it asks you every single time. And if you're working on a difficult boss, on a difficult difficulty, and it's constantly going, just do it on easy mode, mate. Just give up. Just give up on being good. Play it on easy, kick his ass. And some of us don't want that. Some of us aren't motivated by that. And the biggest thing for me is I think the ability to fail is what matters to me most, because it means that I haven't failed. If I can't fail, have I succeeded? Because there was no consequences, right? Video games consequences are interesting. They stem from an arcade place a lot of the time. You have 3 lives because that's what you get for 25 cents or whatever back in an arcade, and that has continued on. Modern games sometimes have lives in for no purpose, but step back as a punishment for failure can be a very good thing, because obviously it's just that little bit of frustration about I failed the boss and now I've got to travel back to the boss. And you don't want it too high. It's awful when you lose an hour's progress because you're dead. And I think games should avoid that for sure. But I do think knocking you back a peg for your lot and going, yeah, you failed and there's a little penalty here is a good idea. But what you don't want to do is kick people twice. You don't want to kill them, take all their stuff, and then go and you get -1 level. Because great, I'm just set back twice. I think the other place it comes to is that sort of build up. So again, this idea of losing can be a really, really good way of building up anticipation. There is something really describe this, I guess, cathartic almost on the calm before the storm. I commented to someone a week or 2 ago about killing in video games. I like it for games that have anticipation, not for games where it's just indiscriminate murder, which, it's got to be one of the most serial killerish things I've had to record as an audio. But as an idea, I don't get on with things like Call of Duty, because you drop into a lobby and pew pew pew, you shoot some guys, they shoot you, you're dead. You click, I'm back in it, you're straight back in it, and pew pew pew, and you just trade a lot, and then you look at your kill death ratio and decide if you did well. That for me doesn't tick the boxes. Whereas if you pick something, I don't know, maybe more like Apex as an example, something where you're doing some setup, there's some running around, there's some planning, there's some scavenging. That lead up to the fight, for me, is really, really important. And one, because if I lose the fight, I lose that progress I just got. I'm reset back to the start of a new lobby with nothing. But also because that build up where you're looking around, you're thinking, you're trying to be present in the moment and in the zone, ready for when the fighting does start, that to me is very important. And I think that translates heavily into that idea of winning and losing, not because the winning is important, but because the build up to that is important in terms of enjoyment. And I'm not sure that applies to absolutely everyone. Some people maybe get nothing from that. But for me personally, I see that as a really important part of winning and losing and consequences, which I think are really just so heavily tied to it. Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it. The TLDR is, I don't think you have to win to have fun. I think winning's great. I love winning, but I don't think you have to win to have fun. I think you just have to have a good experience in that run up. Yeah. video. I hope you've enjoyed listening on to another episode of me talking at you for 15 minutes. I'll see you in the next one.